to our first DifferenceMaker forum. Really excited that you came. And as you'll get to see, they have some really interesting stories about the programs that they've worked with and how they were able to take their ideas with just an idea through all the stages and develop an organization that's really making a difference for them. So I'm going to introduce Holly Butler first, and Holly's going to be our mistress of family and lead the forum discussion. And just real briefly, let me introduce Michelle Mancos. She's with SOS. We have Dan Schmidt with For the Love of the Game. Allison Lay, who is also with SOS, and Aaron Kinney, who is also part of Nonspec, which I talk about you all the time, so they definitely know. Okay, all right, I'm going to turn it over to Holly.
All right, thank you, Deb. Jonathan Dialderetti, who's also on the Nonspec team, will be joining us. He's in class right now, so he'll be a little bit late. So he's going to sneak on stage in a little bit. So thank you all for coming. I'm the director of the DifferenceMaker program. My name is Holly Butler. And just to start, you guys should know what the DifferenceMaker program is, but I'm going to ask you, does anyone know what it is? I had some of you in my class, so you guys got to know what it is. The DifferenceMaker program. A couple sentences. What is it? Be brave. We'll hand out DifferenceMaker prizes. Yes?
It's an opportunity to express your entrepreneurial and innovative ideas.
Exactly. Well said. Well put. So if you have an idea, any idea, you come to DifferenceMaker and we give you the needed resources to help you push that idea forward. So we want to engage students of all majors and disciplines, in all years, all stages, in innovation, entrepreneurship, and creative problem solving. So who we have here today is actually 3 DifferenceMaker teams who have gone through the DifferenceMaker process and who actually won the funding through the Idea Challenge. So they're going to talk to you a bit about the process and their experiences. So I'll ask them a few questions, and then at the end we'll open up to audience questions. And the first 10 people that ask questions will actually get a DifferenceMaker prize. And Casey, could you get a prize up here? You can just raise your hand. She'll hold it here. All right, thanks, Casey. So we're going to start with Erin. So she won the campus-wide DifferenceMaker title in 2013, and that's the highest title that you can win. So she won $5,000, her team won. So Erin, first I just want you to tell the audience when you first got involved with DifferenceMaker, and then what year you are now in school.
So when I first got involved with DifferenceMaker when I was a senior. I was in the plastics engineering program, and I still am now. I'm in the PhD, so I'm almost done. So.
All right, awesome. I'm going to save a couple of questions for John too when he comes, but just to start, would you mind just, I know Deb mentioned that she explains about your project a lot, but just kind of telling the audience more about your project and kind of what you've done with it.
So we make a low-cost prosthetic limb for developing countries. It's made almost entirely out of plastic, and we've designed it so that it could be mass-produced, so we can provide it for a very low cost that's affordable to over 80% of the world's amputees. And we've been able to go to India 2 times now to actually fit patients, and so we have a team that we've built of students in engineering in India who are collecting feedback in all the languages required so that we know how to improve our product as we look into scaling up.
Thank you. And I actually had the pleasure of going to India this winter break to actually teach a course there. And John and Aaron and their other teammate Brendan was there, and they're doing awesome things. So when you say low cost, can you describe that? So how much does a prosthetic cost now? And how much do you think that your prosthetic will cost?
So I'm bad at retaining exact numbers, but in general, in the US, it's very expensive to get a prosthetic limb. It can be $25,000 or higher, depending on what functionality you add. And here we have insurance, at least, so those who need it can at least afford it through that. In developing countries, including in India, they don't really have a very good insurance program. So a lot of the rural areas, people can't afford the limbs, and they get donated devices from charities. And those limbs they don't have a whole lot of ability to make sure that they're really functioning the way that they should and are fit properly. So they kind of go with somewhat a peg leg, if you will, option. So what we're trying to do is to give them an option for a lightweight device that's for under the cost that those charities are paying already for the limbs that they provide, and make it so that one device can fit a variety of people, so our device is actually adjustable, so off the shelf, the same components can fit an 8-year-old and an 18-year-old.
And what makes them really unique, just to expand on it too, is it's low cost, but it's adjustable and expandable. So if it's a child, they actually can fit the child with a prosthetic that over time with the coiling system, the prosthetic actually expands and kind of grows as the child grows into a teenager and into an adult. So it's very proprietary if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
I'm sorry I forgot the prototype, but in general, we should be able to, when we meet scale, when we're injection molding, we can make all of the parts involved in under a minute, and we should be able to sell it for $20 US. And we can actually meet at least 20,000 units. We'll break even with the cost there. So we hope that we can be able to sell this device in the US under the reimbursement system, which will actually allow us to have more money to provide it to those who need it to supplement the costs until we're at the point where we're making enough for it to be cost effective for us to sell at that low cost.
Very cool. So how many people have you been able to test this prototype on so far? So you mentioned you traveled to India. I know you tested on people, so maybe just kind of talking about that process to the students.
So far we have tested on 3 people. Last year when we met a patient in India, we had them walk on the device for the first time. We took his feedback, and then when we returned, he was the first person to get our device to take home. So we have 3 patients who are using our device at home, and they're using it for different purposes. They have different lifestyles, so we're getting a lot of feedback on how it's beneficial in some areas and how we can tweak it in others. But we've really found that the way that the devices fit in those developing countries is lacking. So we're trying to improve so that we can actually give them a knee device and an ankle and a foot that's all dynamic and something that anyone can fit without getting all of the training that we require in the US. So we're trying to make it, without language barriers, a very easy way that anyone can pick it up and fit a patient or themselves if it comes down to it.
Making a true difference, definitely in India. I know Deb mentioned to me that she kind of talks to you guys about the DifferenceMaker method. Does anyone know what the DifferenceMaker method is? A 4-step method? Starts with problem, ends with resources. What are the 2 in the middle? Does anyone remember? Yes. Problem, opportunity. Then what? Solution, resources. She gets a prize. Casey, where's Casey? Yeah. Raise your hand so Casey can get you. Good job, that was good. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. So entrepreneurship is all about problem solving. If you can clearly identify a problem that you're passionate about solving, you can then figure out the opportunity associated with that problem. You can figure out how you're going to solve that problem and the resources. So what do you need to make all of this happen?
And in fact, when we started with a hand and only a hand, and it was myoelectric, so mind controlled, and it was pretty inexpensive comparatively, so it was $75 compared to the hundreds of thousands that are currently being somewhat marketed, although not many people can afford it. And we actually went to a lot of people with the device and they said, this doesn't help us, this isn't going to be something that we can use right now. And I think the worst one is we went to a doctor who was a hand surgeon and he tore our design apart. Like it was not natural, the way we had the fingers folded, it wasn't right. We were like, okay, and he's like, but you're onto something with this expandability thing, and if you really want to see where this can go for allowing people to walk. So although having someone with a hand again is great, there's a lot of barrier to entry to that. There's a lot of training yourself and really figuring out how to work it. And most patients who are upper limb amputees just figure out a way to do it. If you didn't have a hand, you just brace things with your arm, all sorts of things, and that's just how you adapt. But walking, it's a totally different story. So that's really where we had one of our biggest pivots.
Yeah, so I think that's a very important point, just to elaborate on. So when you do think that you've identified the problem, that's why the opportunity part's next, because oftentimes you go out and you talk to people, you survey people, you do research on the internet. The main thing is talking to people, like Erin had mentioned, and these people tell you, that's not the problem. Don't waste your time solving it. But they might say, that's not the problem, but this is. So then you can kind of pivot, change your idea a little bit, adapt, and then move forward. So I think that's a good point that you made, thank you. I'm gonna end with Erin there, because I want John to have some time to speak as well. So next, I'm going to move on to Allison and Michelle, who won the campus-wide DifferenceMaker prize. So once again, that was the top prize, and that year was a $7,000 reward, so it increased a little bit from the prior year. And they're with Support Our Students team. So Allison, I'll start with you. If you wouldn't mind just telling the audience what year you got involved with DifferenceMaker, and then what year are you in school now?
Okay, I got involved with DifferenceMaker when I was a sophomore, and I'm currently a junior here, and I'm a psychology major.
Excellent. And Michelle, if you wouldn't mind just doing, or you got involved this year?
I got involved last semester.
Okay.
This year, but I'm moving into this semester as well.
Okay, perfect. So Allison, I know you were on the team, or you've been on the team for a while now. So if you wouldn't mind just describing what SOS has done so far, and then the money that you won at the Idea Challenge and how you use that money.
Okay, so for Support Our Students, we're a nonprofit organization that works with food insecurity on campus. So we help students who are having trouble affording food and having access to food. And we do this using a meal bank donation system on campus. So people can donate money, and students can donate, if they have a meal plan, they can donate one of their guest meals to us. And then we can allocate those meals to the students who we are helping. And then to date,
Yeah, that's fine.
to date we have helped, or we are currently helping 45 students, and to date we have helped a total of 70 students. We have raised about, or we have donated about 2,800 meals to these students, and through DifferenceMakers and the Hot Cash donation system and some other sponsors, we have raised about $15,000.
Nice job. So once again, problem solving. So I know I mentioned this to some of my classes, that SOS started because they saw a problem on campus. So students who live on campus and have meal plans don't always use all of their meals, so they go to waste. Students who commute don't have meal plans, so sometimes they skip meals, maybe they go hungry, maybe they can't afford meals. So they looked at this problem, they said, okay, what can we do to fill this gap? What can we do to help these students? So it's kind of a win-win. You're not using all your meals, or you want to donate a meal, you can. And then if you need a meal, you can tap into that virtual food bank and actually get meals. And it's also not a food pantry or something like that where you have to go in. It's done very discreetly, just with their UMass little card, which they saw was a problem when they surveyed students. They don't really feel comfortable walking into a food bank or something like that. So they walk right into the DifferenceMaker, swipe their card. We don't know if they're giving a meal or getting a meal or what. So it also helps with that problem. So that's very awesome. And you raised about $15,000 now?
Yeah.
Very nice. So Michelle, you said you became affiliated with SOS this year. So I'm just curious if you can share how you became affiliated with SOS and what compelled you to do so.
Sure. Last semester, my undergrad major is marketing, so last semester I took Professor Finch's nonprofit marketing course. And part of that course was to help SOS implement a new marketing plan. And this course, along with some of our other courses, is what's known as service learning. So everything that you are learning is then applied pretty much immediately to real life time. So in our case, it ended up being us taking the current status of SOS's marketing and trying to figure out ways to help them implement a new marketing plan, new marketing material to kind of expand the awareness of campus. And the decision to to implement that with SOS was Professor Finch, gave us SOS basically, saying, this is an option for you. If you guys have another idea or a different organization you want to implement it into, that's fine too. However, we kind of felt compelled to stay with the organization on campus because we're on campus. We want to work with students as well.
That's great. So would you mind sharing some goals of the marketing plan, when you think it will be implemented, and kind of the timeline on that?
So I'm doing an independent study this semester to implement said plan, and part of that is some of the main goals is to raise awareness, because the majority of you may not be aware of support our students, but a majority of you are probably not aware of the severity of food insecurity on campus. Most likely because it's not like the university wants to be known for something like that, and students have a lot of pride. So we're trying to figure out ways to kind of keep it discreet and implement certain marketing materials to try to gain that awareness and publicity, not only on campus, but publicly and off campus as well. So awareness is one of our main focuses, but we also want to try to attract more volunteers. The more people we have on board, the better, because everybody has different schedules. So if we can get more people on board, it can kind of help make sure that there's more availability for events.
Great. So before this, how many of you, by raise of hands, have heard of Support Our Students? That's awesome. You guys should be proud. That's really cool. And those of you who don't, now you do. So if you want to donate a meal, if you need a meal, you know who to talk to. So Allison and Michelle, I'll throw this one out to you both. So if students are interested, so you mentioned volunteers are wanted and things like that. So if students are interested, how else can they contribute to SOS, and what's the process in doing so? Do they email you? Do they just come to DifferenceMaker? How can they get involved?
Okay, so if you would like to get involved, you could email us at our email, which is sos@uml@gmail.com. We also have a website, it's sosuml.org. And we also work in DifferenceMaker Central, so if you stop by, we might be there, and if not, we can set up a time to meet with us.
Great. And how many are they allowed to donate a semester? I know there's a limit on
Yes, currently you can donate 1 meal per semester.
it. Okay, so if you want to donate, like I said, if you need a meal, please reach out to Allison. And I'll leave you guys for now. I'll move on to Dan. So Dan is part of Love of the Game. They won first place in Significant Social Impact, which was a $4,000 prize. And he's part of Love the Game. So Dan, just to start, if you wouldn't mind stating the year you were when you got involved in DifferenceMaker, and then what year you are in school now.
Sure, I got involved in DifferenceMakers last year when I was a freshman, and I'm a sophomore now.
And the reason I like to ask that question is just so you can see the timeline of when they've come to us, what they've done, and where they are now. So I think that that's usually helpful instead of just stating, here's my year now, like Erin's a PhD student. You might think, oh yeah, she's a PhD student, of course she can do that. But no, when she came to us, yeah, you were a sophomore, junior? Yeah, so you guys can do this kind of stuff. So that just kind of helps you show the timeline. So Dan, please describe Love of the Game and the prize you won, or a little more about the prize that you won and what you've done with the money after DifferenceMaker.
So Love of the Game is a student-run community outreach program that integrates universities and individuals with developmental disabilities in the surrounding communities through sport. We provide an opportunity to connect, learn, and grow through on-campus sports clinics and scrimmages, and really put an emphasis on school spirit and Riverhawk pride, an emphasis on our presence with qualified Division I athletic volunteers, and our scalability in terms of how many people we can really reach out to.
And I know you've done a lot of partnering, so Dan was very active in actually going out to departments in UMass Lowell as well as in the city of Lowell. So you can just talk a bit about the people you've talked to and the partnerships that you've made, because I know that's been pretty instrumental in your success so far.
Sure, so DifferenceMakers has the 35K Idea Challenge coming up, and it's very competitive. So one of the things we wanted to do to separate ourselves was see how many people we could find out in the community that would tag along on our solution and support our solution to the problem that is the lack of sports opportunities for people with disabilities. So, you know, if you do some looking, you can find several groups or several target markets that can help your project. So, groups that we've reached out to that were supportive of us were Kids in Disability Sports, RARA, Greater Lowell, UML Best Buddies, the special ed departments of Lowell Public Schools, Methuen, and Chelmsford, as well as, I think, Lifelink. So, you know, we have a few organizations, we reached out to them, we asked if there was a need for this, and if people had done anything like what we're going to do at the university in the past, and they said no. In fact, kids with disabilities hardly ever have connections to the university, and that we were hitting a new focus point, and it was a really great discovery, and we made a lot of good friends and a lot of good connections.
So once again, going out there, talking to people, seeing what they want, seeing what their needs are, seeing if that's a true problem, and how to go about solving that. Your group did an awesome job in that. So if you could just talk a bit about why you decided to join DifferenceMaker.
So, I knew I wanted to do something in sports business when I got out of college, and a sports management degree maybe would give me something that was not applicable enough to get a job straight out of college. So I came to UMass Lowell because they had a good business program. But DifferenceMaker gave me the opportunity to forge my own career path where I could combine doing something in sports and giving back to the community and being my own boss. So for all that, I've been able to start on my own career path that will change the way I probably live the rest of my life. And you know, besides that, they already had a great reputation for being the best resource on campus to do anything entrepreneurship.
And I remember Dan actually came to me freshman year. Who sent you to the office? Was it Deb?
It was Deb.
Okay, that's what I thought, yeah. So Dan comes in and says, Deb told me to come talk to Holly, and I'm like, I'm Holly. So we sat down, and it was really cool because as a high school student, Dan actually did this at his high school. And it was on the news, and it was successful, and he put on events, and he had Home Depot as a sponsor, and they donated, what was it, the bumpers for the...
So they donated all the raw materials to make wheelchair guards for a power tour soccer game.
Yeah, so he came to me, he basically said, here's my idea, and I'm like, oh, have you done anything like this before? And he brings us this whole like YouTube channel of videos and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, okay, you already have a competitive advantage against other people because you've done something like this. So now you just have to see, okay, it worked at the high school level, will it work at the college level? So he went out there, talked to people, and then your first event was in October, so do you want to talk a bit about the event on, I think it was the 18th, right?
Yeah, October 18th event was a huge success. We had close to 20 individuals with developmental disabilities come out and participate. It was held at the Campus Rec Center. Rowdy the Riverhawk showed up. We had the entire men's varsity basketball team show up in uniform and teach kids with disabilities how to play basketball. And they had a cool scrimmage, and we had music playing, and the kids got free swag back at the end, and everyone had a great time. One mom said that she would bring 10 more people next time, and it truly was a great experience, not only for me, but also for all the participants, for the university, for the community, and it was a good step forward, it really was.
So through that whole process, how did DifferenceMaker help you? What resources did you utilize through the DifferenceMaker program?
So throughout prepping for the 35K Idea Challenge and into this year, I've been using the Makerspace and which is the DifferenceMaker office, and I've accumulated probably over 150 hours of work for Love of the Game in that office alone. They provide resources like Holly and Ha, as well as databases and other things that you need to get your creativity flowing, and they also provide networking opportunities. They've even held a business boot camp over the summer, giving me free textbooks on startups to be able to educate myself on how to start a business, and really taught me what entrepreneurship is all about in terms of how to create a successful business plan and do something that people would really want to buy into.
Awesome. So yeah, DifferenceMaker is definitely here to help you. So if you come up with an idea, you come to DifferenceMaker, we want you to be successful. And after the boot camp, we actually had a demo day where student teams we brought in alumni who were interested in DifferenceMaker and being mentors. and then we allowed our students to actually give a pitch to these mentors. So Dan was matched with a mentor, Tammy. So do you want to talk a bit about how that mentor was able to help you? Because he was actually matched before his event, so he was matched at the beginning of last semester. So maybe just talk a bit about how that mentor helped you.
Yeah, the mentorship was really cool, and I didn't know it was going to be part of the program. We actually got matched with a CFO from a very successful company in Burlington. Tammy Concannon works for corporate technologies. She's a great business mind, and she's really good with money, which is why she's in that position. So she helped us allocate funds. She helped us devise our project plan and budget for it. And even on the day of the event, on October 18th, she showed up and took a day off work and took pictures, helped move around equipment because she loved what we were doing so much, and I really appreciated that.
Great. Thanks, Dan. And I had mentioned that John will be joining us. So John is here. So just to kind of wrap up a bit, Aaron kind of gave us a brief overview of Nonspec and what you guys have done so far. So you won $5,000. So what other successes have happened between winning in 2013 until now? How much money have you raised? Do you have office space? So on
It
and so forth.
scares me how very close that is moved now. Whenever we go back that far, I always have that moment. I do apologize to all of you for being like, that's entirely on me. I'm really bad at scheduling. So we won those $5,000, and after that, we've successfully raised in the last 3 years a little under $250,000. We're currently moving into investment, which is a lot of money. It's kind of a scary process that's a little over my head, and that's actually where DifferenceMaker comes in. They've helped us out with putting us in touch with people who can help us get office space down at the iHub. They've helped us get the funding, practice pitching. Most of the money we have raised is from winning pitch contests. They are terrifying. That is not something that anyone tells you when you're going into them. It's like, oh yeah, you're going to go present to the head of Bayer Pharmaceuticals, and then you're going to present against the head of Bayer Pharmaceuticals. It's not fun. But the foundation that these guys gave us actually made it possible for us to be really comfortable in front of people. I'm going to throw Holly under the bus for this one. About 3 months after we won DifferenceMaker, she put us in front of the largest audience of people I have ever been in front of. About 2,000 people, I think was the number, the entire freshman class at the Songus. We were told ahead of time it would be at the CRC in the gym, and I'm like, all right, that's a nice small group. And then I stood in front of well, I don't think it was you guys, but some of you might have been there. I stood in front of the entire freshman class shaking. I still remember standing at the podium being like, oh my God, I'm talking and I can't hear myself. It's just going out and everyone's just there. Surreal experience, but I have to say after that, there's really not a room you can fill that's terrifying. It's all kind of like, well, at least there's not an unknown number of them all staring at me from bleacher seats. Yeah, waiting for lunch, that was the best part. So they were all hungry and I'm like, great, put that there. But we've also been able to successfully start making partnerships abroad. We have a team over in India. You probably mentioned this because I'm retracing and I wasn't here, it's my fault. We were able to network with people in the Philippines, in Mexico, Bolivia, and all of that was made possible by the connections that you guys helped us forge and the way that they taught us to handle some of these relationships. You guys help out a ton, and you will learn a ton in the process. And even if it's not something that you're going to necessarily use to start your own company, it does help you in the room.
Build your resume, sir.
Absolutely. My resume looks spectacular. It's like, I'm going to just put glitter on it. That's the new plan.
So just kind of going off that point, yeah, we've actually had nursing majors who have come to us. They've launched programs, then they've gone on, they became nurses, and they've passed their idea on to other students. And they've emailed us basically saying they've gotten good jobs and they've been able to get promotions just because they have the team building skills and the public speaking skills and all these other skills that in your nursing classes you're not really taught. So that's a very good point to make. So through all of those successes and achievements, what would you say would be your greatest to date?
Achievements or feeling of achievements? Because those are actually separate things.
You can do both.
I think the greatest feeling of achievement we've ever had is when we were in India and we actually got to watch one of our patients walk without pain. We were working with, very recently, a 25-year-old actually. So this happens every time we meet a patient. I'm always very relieved after they're happy with the device. And she had lost her leg directly in front of her jaw. She had been hit by a bus. Something she said in the most nonchalant tone I think I've ever gotten, like, yeah, I was hit by a bus. Anything else? No, I was just in front of the bus. Okay. So she had a daughter who was really sweet. She was actually in the clinic with us. And her daughter was telling us, yeah, my mom can't bend her knee. She's got some difficulty with housework. She's doing this. This was after she wouldn't talk to me for half an hour. She just stared at me from the other side of the counter like I was doing something wrong. Yeah, and then we had a translator who proceeded to like warm up to her. It was great. But watching her mom be able to walk around, play games, do things. Now she goes out, her nightly walk is out with her daughter. She's able to do that again. And for me, that's like why we do this, is to know that we're making a difference in someone's life. Our actual probable greatest achievement is our ability to secure our network in India and build out this team. On an industrial level, now we've got access to manufacturers and suppliers, and we have a distribution chain. That is arguably our greatest achievement, but I don't consider that anywhere near as rewarding as watching someone be better in any way. And sometimes it's even a little bit like, okay, well, the only major difference in her leg is she can bend her knee. But it's a huge difference for her lifestyle, what she can do all of a sudden.
Great, thank you. And early on too, it was kind of cool because they had pitched at some competitions and they beat out, MIT and Harvard and some other schools. So we were proud of that. So people who,
And to be honest, the skills you'll learn in this program were better than they are across the board. And part of that is that, and this is going to sound terribly elitist, but it's unfortunately true, they just assume they're really good, they don't work at it, and so you'll see groups, watching Harvard present is always the most exciting thing I've ever seen, because their groups are either really good, or they're really good and then they like shoot themselves in the foot on stage, and you're just like, oh. We had one group, I shouldn't be telling the story, but I'm going to anyway. They proceeded to have a temper tantrum about their slides, because they weren't displaying properly. And they're like, oh, this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. I'm like, you were from Harvard and you have to, you're upset because a tenth of your slide is missing? Calm down. And you'd be amazed at how these groups are like, I can't do this in these conditions, or I need $3 million to make this spinal ruler, which literally was a ruler with a piece of metal in it. And so you guys coming from a more practical standpoint, you can do a lot more because we don't quite have that, oh, well, I need $3 million to get this done. I'm worth $150,000 at a time, right? And so, not saying you're not. So that process of creativity is just as functional no matter where you are. And so you don't really have to worry about, well, I'm at UMass Lowell, what am I going to do? Because I've gotten that from students before. Like, well, what do we have access to? You have access to everything you need and then some. Our access to the makerspace and the facilities is actually better than most MIT students have right now. Because if you walk in and you tell John Mulligan, I'm working on a project and I need 3D printer access, you'll get it. There will be hoops to jump through. It's never that easy. You don't just walk in like, I'm going to use that resource right now. But if you have a legitimate reason, people will go out of their way to help you. Be it professors, be it space, be it Holly and Ha. Congratulations, you're not helping everyone.
Thanks. So the makerspace, I just wanted to put in there. So do you guys know what the makerspace is? It's on North Campus. How many of you know what it is? Okay, so you guys should all know, but I just want to make sure everyone knows, I don't want to lose anyone in this conversation. So the makerspace is in Falmouth 102, so it's the bottom floor, and they have different equipment for building. There's some laser cutters, there's some 3D printers, so a lot of engineering students use that, but it's also open to other students and DifferenceMaker teams. So if you have an idea for a product or something like that, John mentioned John Mulligan, who's the manager down there, and we can get you in contact with him and help you get something built. So we also offer that as a resource.
And if you are a business student who's interested in that, what I would highly recommend is finding an engineer for your team. Engineers in general are not always the most socially outgoing people. I know because I am one, and I know are kind. And so it is wise for you guys to reach out and be like, hey, I've got this really cool idea, how would you do that? And they'll either be really for it or really against it, but either way, there's a large chance you can just pull them in onto your team because they'll be excited by the idea. We all like challenges. I'm saying that, and the entire group of engineers is now sad with me and very angry that I've done that. So think about how can I build out that team, and that's what these guys really help you do, is try and figure out who do I need and how can I fill gaps. None of us can do this by ourselves. It's the group of people that we surround ourselves with that make it possible.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm going to throw this last question out to Allison, Dan, and Michelle, and then we're going to open it up. I think it's about 1:40 now. We're going to open it up to audience questions. So just lastly, how do you guys manage your team? move your project forward, your classes? How do you manage all of that? Because I know it can be a lot. So if you guys have any tips, if these students want to get involved, and I know a lot of you are probably in sports and everything else, so if you have any tips for them on kind of time management, I think that would be helpful to share.
I'll go first. So if you can find something that inspires you, you'll find that you're a lot less tired during the day, you're a lot more interested in what you want to do, and that, you know, if what you're working on means something to you, it's very easy to be proactive and be productive and be more than yourself. You have so many resources at your fingertips at this university. You're not going to have them in 4 years. If you can find some way to separate yourself now and figure out what you're doing now, it's going to make the biggest difference for the rest of your life.
Really good advice. Thanks, Dan. Allison, Michelle, did you guys want to add anything? Or John and Aaron, did you want to add anything?
So I do struggle with time management. It is hard for me with classes and work and everything. But what really motivates me is knowing that like I'm making a difference in the students that we're helping. Like we are feeding them and helping them get through their school. So that really motivates me to work on it. It's part of it.
Thanks, Allison. Michelle, did you want to add?
Pretty much the same as Allison was saying. Luckily, this is my last semester, and I've kind of organized it where I do have more time. You know, I had a packed 6-class schedule last semester. This semester I only have 4. So personally, I kind of made that work for myself, but it does just a lot more time for me to try to implement the marketing plan to help as many students as I can.
Thank you. John and Aaron, did you guys want to add?
I know that when you think about some classes that you don't like very much, it's kind of hard to get motivated to start working on the homework and whatnot. But the way that I try to see it is that there's somewhere in that class that you're going to gain a skill that's going to help you with something that you're passionate about. And if you always try to look for those connections, sometimes it can be a little more motivating to get started.
Really good advice too. John?
I think we all learned previously that I'm bad at time management. So I think my biggest advice would be aware of the fact that you don't necessarily have to do everything yourself. I know I get really hung up on, I have to get this done, I have to do it. And for my team, thank God they're there because I can turn around and be like, I need someone else to help me out with this, and I can put it out, and someone else can put in that hour that I don't have, or that 20 minutes sometimes that I just don't think I can find in my day. So reach out to the people around you and say, hey, I'm trying to get this done, but there's one of me, and you guys are, hopefully, you'll have a team, or your friend or someone and say, hey, can you give me 10 minutes of your time to help me out with this? And you'd be amazed at how quickly, 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there, suddenly snowballs into, oh wow, I've spent hundreds of hours on a project. So don't feel the need to be like, well, I need to sit down and work 7 hours a day on this project. I probably do now, but I didn't start that way, and I don't think anyone on our team did.
And some teams do start that way, and we often tell them you have to build a team. People you can rely on, people that you can pass off tasks and work to. I've been meeting with DifferenceMaker teams. I meet with them obviously very often. A lot of times they say, I don't have time to do this, I don't have time to do that. I go, well, you're 1 or 2 people. You need to find other people, like John mentioned, that you feel comfortable saying, and they have the same motivation, they have the same passion, that you can say, hey, do you mind doing this? Can you help me with this? And that makes it a lot easier to be able to juggle everything. So thank you all for my questions. So now I think we have about 15 minutes or so left. So like I mentioned, first 10 students will get a DifferenceMaker prize if you want to ask questions. I know that Professor Finch had mentioned that she asked you all to prepare some questions, so I'm excited to hear them. So please raise your hand if you have a question. Yes?
If you're successful, how long does it take for a turn up the idea to be
There is no fixed timeline on that. I wish there was like a nice happy line, but sometimes you can slave away at something for months and nothing will happen, and then sometimes you'll invent the selfie stick, and that's all I can say about that.
For each of your groups, how long does it take you to get these?
It honestly hasn't taken very long to get from the concept stage to actually making a difference for us, because in social entrepreneurship, in what we're doing, we have very few barriers to entry compared to something that requires engineering. So you know, doing like a social outreach community program, all you really need to do is plan it out and get the people on board and get the funding and move forward. There's another project called Macella Dentures where they have to go through the FDA and do a whole bunch of different things. So the more tech you get, the longer it's going to take.
And in the tech field, it's a lot of hurry up and wait. So you have a lot of small deadlines, and like we'll plan out a 3-month schedule, and it'll feel like the whole time we're not getting enough done, and we'll have crazy weekends where we dump a ton of work in to meet a deadline, and then all of a sudden at the end of the 3 months, we've met all these goals, but it's only such a small chunk of what we overall have to do. But I find breaking it up into those small motivating chunks is helpful. And we've come a long way from where we started. It's been about 3 years. We started with a hand, we went to the arm, now it's a leg. We've done he's done a ton of engineering redesign, but this winter we were able to put it on a patient. So that was a huge goal, and now we're trying to figure out where other clinics we can work with to get this device out there, and it's a totally different process. So now we have to go and really think about the business side, which we had been sort of lacking on in the past, and your goals always rotate in that way. So that's why it's nice to have bigger teams and have somebody focused on each point at all times. But
That's
you
good
can
advice.
do it.
No, that's very good advice. Allison and John?
I was just gonna, sorry, I'm just gonna throw in there, I'm terrible, I'm aware. That part of that is also not everyone on your team is necessarily optimistic at the same time. We joke that we all kind of cycle through this depressive stage in which we're like, none of this is going to work and everything is terrible. And then at least there's someone on the team who's like, no, it's fine, we've got this. And then somewhere in between is kind of where you want to be. So be aware that sometimes in a project you're going to be like, I want to die, and this is awful. And you will literally sit there and be like, this will never work, it can't happen. But hopefully the someone on the team is like, no, we can do this, it'll work, it'll be fine. Or not. But either way, be aware of that kind of feeling as you go through that process.
And then once you get to the point of putting a prosthetic on a patient who needs it, or traveling to India, or helping, you know, hundreds of students with hunger, or putting on an event to help kids who can't normally play sports to engage in sports activities on college campuses. So that's the rewarding
I
part.
think we all have that one moment we can think of where we had an internet action that was just like, this is why I do this, and that's why I'll always do this.
Allison?
I was just going to say that I agree with everyone saying that it does depend on the project that you choose, but for us specifically, after we won Idea Challenge in the spring of 2014, we had worked over the summer, and then we were able to implement our program in that fall.
And then I know you guys did a lot of work with Aramark too, so like I mentioned, going out and talking to people, they wouldn't have been able to do this alone, so they actually now have a partnership with Aramark, who's the food catering company here on campus. So, like I said, going out there, finding more teammates, partnering with people, Love the Game did that, SOS did that, building up your team is very important in the process. Other questions? That was a very good question, thank you. Yes? I'm just going to repeat the questions in case. Can everyone hear in the back? What was the question? So was there ever a point in time where they hit a roadblock that it was very difficult to overcome? Does anyone want to take that one first? If you guys have it, you can go
So when running product trials in a medical device, one of the largest bumps we had was working with doctors. They are not very open to change, and they make that very clear. To the point where we were actually down at the Brigham, and we were talking to a hand surgeon, and he's like, are you ready to do that? Excellent, so you already know. So things like that, they put a serious dent in how you start to approach things. And what they'll do is that they seem like, oh, well, we'll just grow around it. But in the moment when you're doing it, it is like someone threw the brakes on your car. It's terrible. And you're just thinking like, what do I do now? And how do I do this? And luckily, people at DM were there for us. And we have a pretty good advisory board. We go back and be like, help. What's going on? What am I looking at? And most of the time, they'll actually come forward and they'll be like, well, you know, this isn't that big of a setback. All you got to do is change this, modify this, think about this. And what we'll do is we'll take that all in and we'll process it, and then we'll go out and just keep going. It's kind of a situation where your goal while you're working on these projects is just applying constant pressure and hoping that eventually you'll just kind of break through. It's not always the most efficient method, but if you just lay back, it doesn't work anymore. You kind of just feel collapse. And we've seen a lot of groups that we work with out of NCIA and other such grant work where they just kind of collapse on themselves when they get those. So you kind of have to have that mindset for it.
And entrepreneurship is all about creative problem solving, and that's what DifferenceMaker is about too. So not only did these teams define a problem and they started to figure out the opportunity and implementing their solutions, but like all of them have mentioned, they come to roadblocks, so they have to solve that problem. They come to another roadblock, they have to solve that problem. So it's kind of a constant problem solving road, I guess, but they figured it out, so. Anyone else want to add to that? Allison, Michelle, Dan?
There are a lot of legalities and complexities that go into putting on an event at the university, especially if you're not a charitable 501c3 or any other organization. We're just a group of students. So when the NCAA compliance department got word that the basketball team was going to be helping out in an event at the rec center, and we weren't an official 501c3, they almost pulled the event because they were afraid if their basketball players got hurt that we wouldn't be able to be held liable, and that the university might have to pay a bunch of money if there's an injury. So how we figure that out is we're becoming a club. So once we become a club, we can reserve rec center. We can reserve the rec center and have people participate in our program free of liability because we're a university represented group and we follow university insurance. This summer we're incorporating as a 501c3, which will allow us to expand into other universities without needing to be a club and do whatever.
Great.
Yeah.
Allison, did you want to add?
Yeah, I would say that one of our biggest bumps has been our awareness on campus, but hopefully with our new marketing that we're going to be working on, that will help. But another thing was for me personally, so I joined in my sophomore year and then to my junior year, I became the new kind of leader of the group since the co-founders recently graduated. So just adjusting to stepping up, becoming the leader has been somewhat of a challenge to me. But I think it's well worth it, and I'm really excited moving forward.
Good. Thank you, Allison. Michelle, did you have any roadblocks or anything with the marketing plan? Any pivots or changes that you came across?
I wouldn't say any roadblocks, but we know implementing it is going to be the easiest thing. Hopefully with marketing materials itself, we can use current vendors to get really good pricing there. I think one of the bigger challenges, other than awareness, is being able to take the methods that we here and expand it into universities to kind of make it a standard, because UMass Lowell is not the only campus that this is happening on. And like I said before, it's not something a university has to look for, but being known for helping their fellow students is.
So planning on expanding, that makes sense. That anytime you expand anything, obviously that's very difficult. But hopefully it all works out because that is important. Good question. Other questions? Let's take some from the back.
For the local game, are you trying to expand potentially to other college campuses? Are you trying to stay with the goal?
Oh yeah, the goal is to go nationwide. So the cool thing you can do is if we're a 501c3 and we start a foundation, we can start clubs at other universities and donate money so that they can run programs similar to this. And then they can use their resources and their university facilities for free because they're a student-run group. And the whole point really is to emphasize the young presence of volunteers and club and varsity athletes, putting an emphasis on inclusion and school spirit into these groups. So our next step is to move into UMass Boston. I've actually been in contact with their chancellor, and we're going to start with the UMass system and hopefully spread out from there.
Awesome. Other questions? How about from this side? Yes, in the back.
What do you plan on doing with your companies after you graduate?
What do you plan on doing with your companies after you graduate?
Hopefully, I'll be able to work for our company. We are in the stage where we're looking for funding so that we can actually have a full-time team. And that's probably our next biggest roadblock, honestly. But we really do want to continue it as a full-time job.
You know, same for me. I want to do this full-time when I get out of college if I can. It's going to be hard though, because if you run a nonprofit, people don't like, especially if it's a small one, paying yourself enough money even to get free of your college debt and live comfortably might be a little difficult right off the bat. So it's all about really, I think, budgeting right and seeing if everything is feasible and seeing if you have enough resources that can be donated to help that too. But that too, I think, will be Love of the Game's next biggest roadblock, especially because my two other co-founders are graduating this year.
Allison, did you want to add?
Yeah, so after I graduate, I will hopefully continue working with supporter students, and hopefully we'll find some more student volunteers that will help us who aren't going to graduate, that will help continue with our mission.
Yeah, so I mentioned that sometimes students, like the nursing students I use, as an example, they'll have projects and then they'll get a full-time job or they'll move on, but they'll find other students to pick it up. So that's kind of the sustainability of it. So if you want a project to last, you need to find people to pick it up and believe in it after you're gone. So Teresa was one of the co-founders initially, and then she graduated, got a full-time job, so she passed on to Allison. So I think that that's very important. Michelle, are you going to help implement the plan when you graduate, or what's your plan with it all?
I'm not sure if I'll be around after I graduate, and I'm kind of leaving my job search open in different states. Just been something spoke about. So while I'm here, I'm going to do everything I can to hopefully get it set up so that while I'm not here, or whoever is in position can transition to it smoothly. One of the goals of implementing to have that standard across the board, so everyone kind of knows positions are.
Great. Other questions? Let's take another one from the back.
You guys had one piece of advice to give to aspiring entrepreneurs, what would it be?
One piece of advice to give to aspiring entrepreneurs, what would it be?
Do not sit on your idea. Reasonably speaking, the #1 cause we've seen for small startups and small ideas dying is the person who had them holding them too close and then they fail, and only that person has that dream or that drive, and they never shared it with anyone else, and so no one else is on board. Entrepreneurialism as a whole is a very communal effort. Even if there's no one helping you necessarily do your task, there's an entire community that can maybe navigate you through an entire field of landmines that you are not aware of. So keep in mind that while you're working, that if you have an idea, don't worry about, no one's going to take it from you. I don't think I've ever heard of a group that really started an idea and had it stolen. That's kind of not done. It's a huge faux pas. It also helps that most ideas are very protectable. Like, if you think about it, it'd be very hard to steal a piece of software unless you gave it to someone willingly. It's very hard to steal a charity idea. It's all of that stuff. People always worry about that. Like, oh no, what if someone takes it? You're too small right now to worry about that. And when you're big enough to worry about that, there are people who help you out with that. That's why we have lawyers. Actually.
Good advice.
Mine would be to not doubt yourself. The world that we live in today was created by people that are no smarter, no more creative than you. And you have the tools and you have the creativity and you have the smarts. And if you just put in a little bit of effort, you can really go a long way.
Allison, Michelle, you guys want to add anything?
I would say, keep in mind that even if you're not the person that has the idea, if there is somebody else's idea you can be passionate about, still try to get on that team, because I'm coming from a marketing standpoint. I didn't come up with the SMS idea. Obviously, I have a passion to end on this, but I'm more from a marketing standpoint. So don't sit on the sidelines, and if you're the one that doesn't have $100,000 idea, try to get involved in it if possible. And don't be afraid to fail. That's what we're all doing about.
Yeah, oftentimes people actually learn more from their failures, so failure is actually a good thing as long as you learn from it and you can record from that. And the other point I wanted to make that was really good too was a lot of teams, so if you don't have an idea, a lot of teams need your help. So they need certain skill sets, they need business people, they need engineering people, so on and so forth. So if you have skills and you don't necessarily have an idea, but you want to get involved, come to DifferenceMaker and we can help link you up with a team that you might be interested in. Allison, did you want to add anything?
Well, I was going to say, don't be afraid to fail.
Awesome. And now it's almost 2 o'clock, so one more question. Your hand was up a couple of times, so I'm going to give you this question. Oh, I was sorry. I was pointing to him, but you can go, and then you can go up front.
I'll
Sorry.
say yes, and if you come up afterwards, I can explain.
What was your question? Okay, if you guys want to briefly
just got our
do,
patent
yeah.
approved. We started it like a year and a half ago. 2 years. The school has resources to help you get you through that process. There's also an awesome course to take by Professor Grossman that tells you all the stuff you need to know to analyze patents. That's really helpful. And Google Patents is great for searching for prior art and potential things to see if your idea is novel.
That was a good question too. I'm glad you did ask that one. So the university does have an intellectual property office. So if students come to us with ideas or products that we think are patentable, we will help them with that process. And then last question up front, the black. You had a question, right? You had your hand up multiple times. Okay, let's hear it. Yep. So how did you guys move from your problem to actually the opportunity of figuring out what you're going to do with it?
As soon as we started talking about it, the people's stories just kept coming. We have a Facebook and a website. We get emails all the time. My family member or myself or this person that I met that's really important in my life is an amputee. They don't have the funding to afford something that would really let them live the life that they should be living. And we really said, wow, the numbers that we researched are accurate. And he had this moment in India where just if you're looking at things online, it's just kind of numbers. And you can think about it in a pie chart and it seems huge. But when you start meeting those populations and figuring out how many people clinics handle, even in a small community, every year, it's crazy that those numbers are accurate and you really see what really needs to be fixed.
So it's past 2 o'clock now, so I want to be respectful of your time. So we'll stop there. Sorry if you guys wanted to add on that one, but I'm going to pass it off to Professor Finch. I wanted to thank you all for your patience and sitting quietly and asking very good questions. If you're interested in getting involved with DifferenceMaker, please email us or visit us at DifferenceMaker Central, which is right next to Starbucks on North Campus. Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you. I think we owe them a big round of applause. I really appreciate you guys waiting to the end. If you have a meal plan and you have the gold or platinum and you can donate a meal, Allison will be out front by the table and you can donate one this semester because we're always in need each semester. And the only other thing I wanted to remind you that Tuesday is a Monday schedule. Okay? Long weekend, it's gonna confuse you. Have a great weekend, guys.